Yak ďoxateení ďakatúhan. Gwalliachan a cohanti a dati jigachtuné. Chusakutanga wait at su skalsnig. Skalsnig awe a dati jituné. Hatuasagu witusaku a de kun skatulnig ye. A joe skalsnig dati jachane. Ejituné. Yaltakatuhan. Wuchin. Hasta ani kakrechat yati. Lanapi hasta ani. Manhattan, you do a sago at ya hit Tlein ḳunateení. Ḥunateení ḳúowu ya at kach. Cleatge tatge. Shakat ḳúowu yagi. Ya qa like wilchakut ḳúowu. Desai ya tlach tuashko dati tuchtatan. Ye awa ach Achani awe yati ya achkak du yid. Hu awe chosateen chatuin chwacha ḳunateení. Aqawe ya seqanen gwelltella sai qhusi. At.óowu dakihiti plague. Qa ayi dakihiti he chosaku. Tlekach enach museum for adequa good. Tlein ya ayi hastujiwu ya American Museum of Natural History, you do a song. Hasu, Princeton, Denver, Portland, Adisatsu, Burke, Alaska State Museum, Anchorage. Tlein Llingit ayi hastujiwu. Ye away yechwaji. Just take I hit Tlein ye hastujiwu. Ayi ayanach chaltakat we take Llingit an wal tak an deshu shqaqwe natasayin deslin Tlein chadaqasa sitka sheetka hastu yanach aya hastujiwu Llingit ayi. Najoy kone adati jak kone kakwa ak adati jak kone ya stekata ayi kuchte kagax toojéil ya ayi we hiti dach akho gwalhasawu akho gwalhasawa tau ya ayi at.óowu ḥunateení qatsaqi qada it wan qanins ayi yati aqawe adati tuchtatan wechiti dana ḥuowu gwalha idehas kuchtashi dana hajidehas hasakwati ya ayi yenach tutlaqit yis at qoach tuasagu gwalnachain we museum yi godach yidet we kasne has ausaku we nachain adekatusne ye gwal adusa hasu has auslatu wuchin ye has jigachtu ye has jikwane adan yis nachain has kagaxsane we wush de sechen ye gartusane godach ayi qayis ayi ye awa yin kakunik le enachzu ye qoa we New York City Tlein ye atcha ye kahwe just kleka gucha qoa chu ya Kleidushu kai aya konach na lle aya chogud atjoy we has to kach we achto saguan Milchisha reidi sa achi yitwa gesugu ylatkin ylatki Llingit renach kuk Uchi ayata. Kombucha, you do a sako. Ya achit. Dasa itina. Kombucha. Hukoa. Hin kajucha. Chatlako kwati. Hin kajucha. Okay. What was I talking about?
You started off talking about Taka and the story, and I don't know. Then you went into a whole bunch of towns and museums. I'm guessing you're on a road trip. You're in New York now, but you mentioned a lot of museums / cities and at.óowu and then something about for money after that. I thought you said Donna something for money. I don't know. Maybe they sold them for money. I don't know. But a lot of clans and communities at.óowu in these museums.
You can.
And then some of coffee in New York.
Yeah. Oh, like I walked 6 miles for a cup of coffee today.
6 miles. I heard the coffee in the 6 and thought maybe you were 6 hours late and needed coffee.
I recognize
something about ňunateení.
Oh, yeah, away. Yeah, away. Okay. I heard 2 Tlingit words there, but there was an English word. I heard ňunateení, like a fort.
Ysnateení.
Like, whoa.
ňunateení
yes.
would be really cool. Like we should have one of those.
Put it on the agenda. But yeah, so you guys are picking up lots. Anything else?
Wu-Chain working together.
Oh, we could barely hear you. A little louder.
Wu-Chain working together.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Working together. Yeah, away. Okay.
You're talking. Yes, so you're talking about what you did yesterday, what you're going to do tomorrow, and what you're doing today.
Okay.
And you're going to museums, and your Museum of Natural History, the American Museum of Natural History.
That's right.
And then you started talking about the inland tlingits. And so I'm going to go that you're talking about going to watch or see stolen artifacts tomorrow at the museum.
Yeah, that you guys are picking up lots. Yes. So let's see. Yeah, so I mentioned I'm in the land of the Lenape peoples called Manhattan. Lots of people. I think I also mentioned yesterday it was Indigenous Peoples Day, and I walked around, and there wasn't a whole lot that I could see that was about that. There was a lot about this one dude, though. That's a statue and some roads here, so I just left it alone. I had this Monopoly shirt that says "Stolen Land" on it. But it's there's lots of good food here. There's lots of really neat things to see. And then and I said we've been working on we're going to work tonight on the Kahonti story, because that's what you're translating for your midterm, and we're going to start the walkthrough, maybe 1 or 2 sentences a night, 3 or 4, and just sort of talk about the process of translation. And we also were working a lot on the mosquito story, with the idea that we want to study how people tell stories so that we can become storytellers ourselves, because it's a lot of communication, right? I just had dinner with a friend of mine who his dad is my uncle, and I guess he's a cousin of mine. And so, and like half the dinner was me just telling stories to his kids, like, starting in Tlingit and switching over to English. And so so I'm going to go to the Museum of Natural History tomorrow. And I've been thinking a lot about museums because I have this project idea. And here's the idea. What I was saying is there's quite a few museums, and I named the ones that I could think of. And I started to think about this stuff. I went to Princeton a couple of years ago. And it was great. But then I was also thinking, this museum has more Tlingit stuff than any single Tlingit community. That's wild to me. That's just wild, And so, and I know some stuff was purchased, and I know some stuff was acquired through maybe ethical means, but I think a lot of stuff was stolen. I think that's a lot of colonial exploitation. So I'm trying to put together a project where we raise a bunch of money from rich people who fund this project, where we bring a master artist over and we look at stuff like if there's a ňáxéin. We've got weavers now. We've always had them, but it seems to be like kind of picking up in energy, right? And then they bring some people that they're teaching, their apprentices. When they look at something, then they go home, and then they make something. And then they bring the new thing over that's been paid for, and then they bring the old thing home. So it's a łushtisation, it's a trade, so that we can get our things back to our communities. And so I've been talking to some folks over here about the idea. I think I felt like I walked 6 miles for a cup of coffee too, because there was this, you get coffee all over the place. It was like, there's this one coffee shop I want to go to, and everything's so far, but it's nice to walk around. So yeah, and then so we're gonna work together on these things, and yeah, that's why we're working on the stories, working on them together. Any thoughts or language questions that you folks have?
I had a question when trying to translate tacha or taka.
Mm-hmm.
The first two sentences both have what look like very similar words, utich and dik. The second one I understand, but the first one, it looks like or the perfective of to be, but then it has that underlined X. And I tried looking up the underlined X and couldn't really find out what that meant.
Yeah, okay. Okay, let me, I think it's slowly opening. Okay, here we go. So let me put these into different documents so we can mess around with them.
I had the same question, Mike, and I actually found the answer in the notes part of Hashuka, which was, but I spent
Okay.
a lot of time trying to figure that out, and it was in the notes in Hashuka.
Yeah, so here we are. These are the first two sentences, right? These are the two you're talking about, yeah? Make sure. Okay, so we're gonna make these a little smaller. So if we were to sort of just pull these things apart, we do have they look similar, but these are two different verbs. So when we get down to here, so the other thing I like to kind of do is I'll just sort of say, this is a verb, and we'll just kind of make it red. We can pick any color we want. I know we got a whole color scheme we're working on. But like when I go through, I might sort of highlight some things too. And so I would say the first thing that I would think about is each of these sentences has one verb. Right. So this is one approach that I usually take when teaching folks how to start translating, is I'll say, find everything that's not a verb and figure them out, right? Because you could look those up pretty quickly. And then that gets you to the verbs, which takes a little bit more time as we learn more and more about verbs. So then we would say there, or maybe like way over there. I gotta make this a bit smaller. So we might have there, in the interior, this is, and then we might do something similar for down here. Check the chat. Okay. Yes, I have. So, anybody know what kach is?
Kach is very.
Very. This is. And then verb. That's not a website. Okay. You can skip the verb. Halkusti comes from a verb. That's not a verb.
Or life.
Our lives.
Yeah, our life, our way of life. Right? This is popping up in two places. It's the same thing. Anybody know what that one is?
I assumed that it was like at that place or something related to that because of the pinched X, but that was just a guess.
That's a really good guess. And Tlingit loves to do this. Once it names the
It's
place,
located.
right there, now it's going to switch to that place, which is ah. And then once you put on it, it goes to It just does this all the time. It does it with people, it does it with places. It's like, yeah, I told you what the place is. So at that place, here's what happened, right? So that gives us a really good sort of hint. And so this one's probably actually easier to deal with because if you look it up, if we want to go down here, this is what you have is you have a 0, you have perfective marker, and you have a classifier, and then you have a verb root, right? So this verb root is difficult or hard. And so wutik would be, in this case, it was difficult. So in that case, you have, and the tlach is jumping over, because so tlach is an adverb. So it's going to affect the verb. Whenever that verb, it might take a while for that verb to come. It says, okay, very difficult our life was at that place. Okay, so that's how we sort of deal with that. This one's a little funky. So we would see it much more commonly as ḥunateení. That's how we usually see this verb. It usually does not have the suffix on there, right? And so this, so again, we probably recognize this verb as like ḥunateení. We are there, we were there, right? And so again, this verb has the same beginning, but then it has this. And this implies repetition or moving around. So in this case, when you have we were repeatedly at the interior, is basically what I would sort of interpret this. The inland, we were there repeatedly, either moving around or like went inland, back to the coast, inland, back to the coast, that type of stuff. It's really rare, I think, to see the verb like this. But, you know, that's a good question. Anything else you folks were thinking about?
There was one I had on way down. It took me a while to figure out. It was let me see. It was in, I think, around sentence 19 or 20. It was in the it said al-quds for the verb al-quds. But I couldn't find it, so I went searching the verb dictionary for for oots, and then it came up with al-quds when I found a meaning that makes sense, which was he breaks, but the spelling in the document was al-quds without the W, without the I.
Oh, where is that?
But I think I found the right, like, I think it's supposed to be al-quds with the W and the I, but I don't know.
Yes.
But I could be wrong. I'm going to say Robert Zuboff is wrong. I don't know if they wrote it down like that. But yeah.
No, it's another great example, right? And so this is where, like, we're just going to continue to engage in some of these conversations, right? So one of the conversations that we're kind of like, what do we do with these stories? They're such beautiful, wonderful, incredible stories. But the other thing with these stories is you just tend to get stuff that's fairly complicated and sometimes a little unusual. So again, we can, we're gonna start over here. I'm gonna start over. And we do see, again, we've got one verb. right? So there's one verb. So the first thing, isolate the verb. And so the other part is, you could say these, because it's plural, strings, right? So there's something going on with these strings. And then the next step is we might go to the verb dictionary and we might say, okay, let me go look up oots and see what I could find. So we go down to K apostrophe, and then we see to break rope-like objects. And then we might sort of roll back there and just sort of see. So we go look up break to see what's going on. See if we can find anything. So with break, there's 20 different verbs for breaking things because it depends on what you're breaking. There's something to break suddenly and give way suddenly, to break pieces off of food with your hand, to break usually fairly fragile objects, a rare one that's not very common, to break here's another, to break it into pieces, to break eggs, to break solid objects, to break long objects, and this would also include bones, to break something by bending it, to break something that's a long object broken into little pieces, to break halibut hooks specifically. Of course, okay, we got a verb for breaking halibut hooks. We've also got a verb for fishing with halibut hooks. Because I think when you got really frustrated with your halibut fishing, you broke your halibut hooks. To break things into pieces, to crumble them up, to smash them into pieces, to snap something. And now we're getting there, right? And here it is, right? And then we have breaking off a solid object to another. And so we see ḥuatlakúts and we see taskuchlakúts. And so in both of these cases, we do have ḥuatle and we have guchla. Nowadays, we would write this G as just GU, right? We'll learn how to spot which ones Story and Niche would always write long, that we would write short. So the next thing that we could do, so it gets us in the neighborhood, right? So like, I kind of like to do the verbs last because we might end up there for a while. And this is just going to be a place that you're a resident of verb land now. So pack your bags and move in and get settled because you're going to be in this space off and on. So the other thing we can do is go into the database and just take a look, see, and just see if we could find this verb in here. I think it's a good idea to, like, once you look up a verb, just be like, oh, I need to know how this verb works. And so we look it up in the verb dictionary. Once we find it, we go look it up in the English section of the verb dictionary. And then we'll just go wander over and see if it's here. So here it is. And we see nachkúts for break it, don't break it, broke it, didn't break it, will break it, won't break it. Hortative, let them break it, always break it, haven't broken it yet, can't break it, would have broken it when they break it, and to break something regularly. They're always breaking ropes. I don't know why it's saying. But what's really interesting here when you get into storytelling is you'll see this, which says there's no imperfective form of this verb. But Robert Zuboff is a master storyteller. So he gives us an imperfective of this verb, which is uncommon. And we know, because like, if we're to take this thing apart, right? So we're to take this verb, we have we have zero, we have ḥla, and we have kúts. And these are all the pieces that are in there. Now it is ḥla, but there's something that you're going to learn is if you have sa, ḥla, or sha as a classifier, there are certain things that can cancel that a verb. They could just knock it right out. And one of those things is this. If you have and zero doesn't count for anything, there's nothing in between and sa, sha, or sha, it will change it to just the letter. So then that classifier becomes, and you get oots. So what's really
Okay. I just thought in the story it looked perfective to me, like he broke the strings. I didn't like it would have changed my mind if he was breaking the string.
we would clear,
Okay.
and so to get that, and that's what I would expect, but you would end up with that perfective marker would be there. So I'm going to put these, I'm going to stack them. So what you would end up with is a perfective marker right there, and this switching to I. Like, so the plus I gets activated to say, yep, it happened. We got to turn that thing plus I. But that means it won't contract. You won't have that, just the letter L. You would have aushikuts. So it's not a common way to use this verb at all. It kind of, if you're a master storyteller, like a master artist, like, you know, a friend of mine has this kid he's chaotic good. I think he's a really good kid, but he was climbing a tree at our house. I said, hey man, don't fall out of that tree. And he goes, is that the rule? And I said, sure, that's the rule. He says, because I break the rules. I was like, oh no, don't break this rule. So like a master storyteller can break the rules. We are not, and like if you study Tlingit, you would say, okay, this is what we call an event verb. There's no imperfective. Then you listen to the story by Robert Zuboff, it gives you an imperfective. And so, and then you can, the more you learn about Tlingit, the more you can sort of theorize with this kind of stuff. You're like, oh, maybe he's playing around with a language. Maybe he's doing, because maybe it's an unusual situation. So we have to focus on this act of him. He's in the act of breaking these rules, which you might expect something like, yeah, anashkuts. Right. That's, if I were to predict it, I would say, well, maybe it's got a progressive because event verbs aren't supposed to have imperfectives, but he's Robert Zuboff. He can do whatever he wants.
Is there maybe something like if you don't have the progressive for breaking a single rope, but like if you have to break the whole series of tikisani, is that?
See, it could be that too, which is always fun. Like Richard Downhauer was so fun because he would get into these puzzles. He's like, it's gotta mean something, because and so maybe that's it. It's like we zoom in and he's frantically breaking these strings to get out, right? Because it's these, and you'll see multiple stories. There's a Raven story. So if you're trying to hold someone captive, which I don't advise you to do, I'm not telling you to do that. Don't tie them up with strings that are made out of spruce roots, because there's a Raven story too where he tricked his nephew who was mad, and he ate all of his nephew's ishkeen, black cod. They were rendering grease from black cod, and he ate it all. So the nephew's all mad. It's like, I'm going to put you in this box and tie the box up and throw it down a mountain. And he says, well, don't use that rope. You should use these spruce root strings. They're really good. So it's like, all right. And then he throws it down, and then they break. They always break. I guess that's part of the story. So, okay. Good sheesh. Good questions. Anything else? Okay. So we'll keep looking at taka. But the one thing with taka too is it's still getting near the full version where it's very complicated. There's tons of stuff going on in there, which, we learn from the stories, which is great. But then there's also such huge pieces of language in there, which, we're not going to be able to escape completely. However, before we go into Kahanti, can anybody tell me what this thing is called?
Oh,
That's a go.
Go. And how would I say my go?
Ach,
ḵunateení.
gáwu. Ignore the other part. Don't worry about it. It's too advanced. What about this?
Heen.
Keen. And if it's mine,
ḵunateení.
heenie. Right? It's got to stay high low, right? What about this stuff?
A cane.
Yeah, oh wow. Cocaine. And if it's mine,
ďateení.
Ďateení.
cocaine.
Ďateení.
What about this guy? Weasel
Noosk.
test. Yes. News. Weasel test every day. And if it's mine, it's the last pet you'll ever own.
Nusku.
Nusku, right? Rounded end gets the U. Oh, fishy test, little fishies. Eulisha? Hooligan?
Hooligan.
Oh.
It's not Yao.
No, that was herring.
Yukon, they're all the same.
Sitka knows the difference.
Yeah, this is okay for inland folks. I know it's not fair. I'll try and make sure I put I got put a bunch of lake fish in the next one. I promise. I'm all about equity. Anybody know the name?
Sake oe.
Sock.
Sock.
It's mine.
Saki.
Sagu.
Sagi. Right?
Sagi.
Sagi. And that K to a G.
Ah.
Shaw. If it's mine,
Shai.
Shaye. Yeah, oh, yeah, oh. Uh-oh.
Ina.
Say it again.
Tia.
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 Tia. So this one, here's another rule breaker. What's it gonna be?
Tiye.
Ti.
Tiye.
And they all got to stay short and low. Tiye.
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 Tia.
Tiye.
Wait the claw.
Wasu.
Wasus. It's mine.
Wasusi.
Wasusi. Yeah, oh. Uh-oh. Oh, sorry, inlanders. It's more coastal, just coastal preference. Ishan.
Is it ya?
It is.
Ya.
Yeah. And if it's mine,
Yagu.
yeah. Yeah, oh well. Yeah, okay. No rounded end, so it's gotta be the I.
Seek.
Yeah, oh well. Seek. And if it's mine,
Seeki.
Siki. Siki.
Seeky.
Dana.
Donna. Yeah.
Dana.
This will do the same thing. You go from to aye. Everything's short and low.
Dana.
Dana.
Danaye.
Danaye.
Awut.
Yeah, oh, kawoot. It's mine.
Kawuti.
Kawooty.
Kawuti.
Yeah. To the D.
Dis.
Yeah, oh, wow. It's mine.
Disi.
Disse.
Oh, the picture changed. Whoops. D. Tree test.
Older.
Is that at.óowu?
Like,
Is it chus?
like,
Kies. Sheikh.
like.
As.
Yes.
I win.
Yes. Keshish.
Keshish.
Okay,
Keshish.
shish.
This is the one that people like to make hot dog sticks out of. This is not the tall one that turns red when you cut into it. That one's sheikh. Okay. And if it's mine,
Keshishi.
keshishi.
Kish.
Get away.
Keshishi.
Get away.
Ani.
On.
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 If it's mine,
Ani.
Ane.
Anane.
ani.
Gish.
Yeesh.
Yeesh.
Mine?
Gishi.
Gishe.
Gishi.
Gun.
I want to say gun.
Gun. It's mine?
Gani.
Gunne.
Gani. Gani.
Gunny. Gunny.
Gani. Gani. Cost.
Cost. If it's mine,
Caste.
costi. Yeah, away. Yeah, away. This thing right here.
Is that your bed in New York?
Good night,
Nah,
folks.
nah.
Isi kuke what yata. What's that do a sock? Comes from sha, ye, at. Put them together, and you've got shayit. Shayit. And if it's mine,
Shayedi.
shayeti. Yeah, away.
Oh, cute.
Keet. It's mine.
Kidi.
Kide.
Keety. Yeah, away.
Tan.
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 It's mine.
Tane.
Ani.
Tani. Yeah, away. Yeah, away. Okay. Gonna cheesh. Okay. So the relational suffix, like there'll be a few I think that we'll still have to think about, but it's like thinking back on that set of rules, like a complex set of rules. But once you start doing it, you're like, okay, all of those things make sense, right? It's just like the fastest way to make a sound that does that sort of thing, right? So an I or a U. So now coming back to our translation work, I want to talk about a couple of resources really quick. So this is the most comprehensive verb document that we have right now in terms of the most verbs. This also includes verbs that I think some people were a little embarrassed of. So anything that has to do with going to the bathroom or any sort of sexual types of things, they're all included in here, a lot of the known ones. It is in pencil, which makes it a little tough to read. It does have some different sort of markings in it that we might not be using every day. And sometimes when you go to click on something, like if I click on this and I go to tick, like it usually brings me down below the actual mark. So one of the things that happened, probably 6 years ago, is it was retyped for us by Tlein. And so I took the document that she had typed back up and just gave it a bit of a reformat. So the downside to this reformat is if you go under here, it just gives you the verb root in terms of combinations of a single letter and a consonant. So for example, here's D, the DA vowels, the DE, DI, well, they're, and then so da, de, di, do. It does not list out every individual verb root like the other document does. However, I think that's okay, because when I look at this one on like my phone and I go to the table of contents, I have to scroll through every single verb. It takes a long time to do that. So in the meantime, we do have this typed up version. So I'll put this on our class webpage so you folks have it. For example, if we were just looking up eek, so we would go down to the T apostrophe, which the other sort of big question as I continue to sort of mess around with this document is, do we rearrange it so it's following the alphabet that we're using these days? Just similar to A, B, C, D, F, G, right? So we're going to go to the T, and that takes us right here. And we'll scroll down until we get to T. So ice, something hard. Then we have uwatik, kawatik, akshatik, akausatik, wudnatik. And so the other thing is it shows us like, and again, like it has the most number of verb entries, but it usually only shows us perfective and sometimes imperfective forms of that verb. So that means we've got to do quite a bit more work to sort of use that verb, but sometimes it gives us an awful lot of information. So I just want you to know that this is out there. We're going to, folks who have been doing this for a while, we talk about this stuff a lot, like what's next for these resources? How do we continue to make them more usable? Which all brings us back to this story that we're translating. Now we're doing it together. So this book just came out. It came out just shortly before I left town, so I didn't grab any copies before I left, but I will be working on getting you folks each a copy of the book. There's a book release party if you're in the Occoquan area on October 27th. And we're going to have an event there. I think there might even be t-shirts. So lots of cool stuff. And so really trying to celebrate the launch of this thing. There's going to be an animated version that has the story read out loud. And I've done a lot. I mean, you could, if you really dug around, I'm sure you could find the translation. I'm trying to make it very hard to find. And so we are going to translate this together. And hopefully you've done some work on your own with this. If you haven't yet, that's okay. We're going to probably do 3 or 4 sentences, then we'll switch to something a little different. So the way I'd like to do this is, can I get someone to read this first sentence?
You know that.
Huh.
Yatak ḥunateení at.óowu awe hastu ḳunateení.
Okay. Yatak ḥunateení awe hastu ḳunateení. So, which ones, are there any verbs?
Yeah. If you just did
Ħunateení.
taka, yeah. Uti,
That's one of them.
hard, difficult. Other verbs.
Ḥunateení.
Kusiat, it's got to be a verb, yeah.
There we go. So we have our 2 verbs, kusiat and wutik. Do we know what everything else is that's not a verb here?
Yeah, winter, berry, life. Our life was hard. talk winter was very.
Our way of life was
Oh,
hard.
cold. It was cold.
Their way of life.
Yeah,
Their way of life.
it was a very cold winter.
Yatak kunach a very long time ago.
Okay, hold on.
Oh, ours would be ha ḳunateení. Yeah.
Away. Yeah, away. So I'm gonna change the color of this because this is part of that verb phrase. Right? It's an adverb, but of course can make a
Mm.
okay. So I would say you could say the or this. If you want to translate the yeah, it works either way. Sometimes you sort of come back and you put it back together through context. The winter was very cold. Okay. And now, what is that?
People.
Yeah. The people away hostile pusti. Their way of life was difficult. Any questions about any of that?
It's a very similar setup to the last story we studied.
Right. He was preparing us. Sheesh, Uncle Shah Dog, getting us ready for this cold winter. Geez, all these winters. But a long time, they say, when they tell stories, it's a long time ago, winters were so cold. But also, like, people had to build fires every day and stuff. So it's like totally different time.
Winter is nothing to joke about.
Right? Just hard living back in the day. Gee whiz. Okay. So a lot of times when we're translating too, we end up sort of like going piece by piece. Then we might go through, and it kind of depends what our intention is. Our intention here is to learn how the tlingit works to say these things, right? Like, how would someone tell a story? What are they going to say? How do I recognize these different words that are in here? Because there's going to be a bunch of them. Like, we're seeing this already. Like, okay, yeah, I learned that one. But then sometimes you might go through and sort of reword this if you wanted to, right? The winter was very cold. It was very difficult. The people had a very difficult life. However you want to sort of do that thing. We're not going to do too much adjusting of the English, but if you were doing this stuff for publication, you might, Okay. Can I get another reader for sentence number 2?
Ǩunateení Tlein at.óowu káyaní jít kushuwaní wachích kushuwanchích.
Sheesh. Ḥunateení Tlein at.óowu káyaní jít kushuwanchích. How many verbs?
Well, there's óowu.
Yeah.
And Yannick.
Yannick is
Yannick
a verb,
Kushawahi 4.
but in this case, it's a noun.
Okay.
So you are right.
Okay.
But in this case, it is, because we would say Yannick. And so it's an interesting one because we have it here presented in 2 different ways, and it's actually doing the same thing. That's unusual, but I've seen this Nick as Yannick and Nick. It's an interesting one. So we've got our 2 verbs. So once we find our 2 verbs, we'll say, okay, we're going to work on those. Let's make sure we understand everything else.
A lot of bad sickness or strong sickness.
Yeah, so this is something that's very hard to tell. You could have ḥunateení, and that would be a real sickness. But I think you have ní Tlein ḥunach. So you would say a big sickness, really. We'll get to the verb in a second. What is that?
And
And
Yannick, again, sickness.
Sickness.
What about Jeet?
Is that like possessions or something like that?
G is possession, yes.
Okay.
So you do have possession plus.
Like
The T is a
habitual
locator.
Yes.
like the sickness took.
Florida.
the habitual.
Is the
I guess,
T
is
like
one
a
that I like.
locator type thing, like when you touch your hand?
Okay, so you could say, let's see. You could say hudach, and you could also say put. In the same way, you could say jidach, and you can say jid.
Yeah.
So this is something that Tlingit does, I think, to create a bit of a metaphorical statement. And so the way that I've heard this used is something like this. You'd say, ach, ye, jene, ye, jidach, chat, udechwet. What do you think that's saying?
my work has me sick,
Oh, but
has me tired.
Yes, I am tired from working.
Hmm.
So there's this interesting thing that Tlingit does where it uses this to say like this thing made this other thing happen. And it usually happens with non-human type of things, but it sort of says like this is what caused the thing to happen, which I'm now remembering we had a question before class, which we'll get to right after we translate this one.
Is it kind of like how you could say, oh, my wife has me working, oh, my family has me at this place, you know? It's not like they have you, but it's like they have you doing something or have
Yeah,
you
like
in a certain way.
it caused the thing, but it's a really interesting thing because you're saying from the possession of sickness, then we get this big, in this case, nasty verb.
Hmm.
Okay. So now, and sickness caused. Now we got to go to verb country. At.óowu. What does that one say?
I remember that uagut is a negative.
Well,
uh,
well, you could say
Came upon them.
ugut or uagut, right? They both have to do with like going somewhere, walking. But when you have cut uagut, this is also a bit of a metaphor. So yeah, this would say really came upon them. And whenever you have this, like, because it's coming upon people, or that could be like you or me or someone that we're talking, do cut to a good, it's usually something really bad. And it means it kind of happens suddenly. Right. And so there's different ways that you're going to see this type of thing used. And you could use it in a non-metaphorical way. You could say, take cut to a good, they walked up onto a rock. Right. And that's not saying anything really, there's no meaning beyond that. But when you say it's like a sickness really came upon the people. And then we get which might be a good time to look up this verb. So we'll go back to the verb dictionary. We'll go down to key. And we're looking for shuwahi. That's what we're looking for. So when we look at verbs up here, now that we're starting to learn all these different parts, and we're going to talk a little bit after our break about what are these different parts? What does all this stuff mean? So what we end up with is they show us a verb group. They will usually present these things, and then they'll show you what happens when you change the classifier. Yeah, they'll go from 0 to S, to usually D plus S, and then L, D plus L, SH, D plus SH. So they'll usually go in that order. And they'll say, here's how, because that's how you can make new verbs. If you change the classifier group, that's a different verb. Then they'll say, okay, well, what happens if we start adding thematic prefixes, which is ka, the horizontal surface, ya, the vertical surface, sa, the base of the neck, j, the hand, sh, the end, it's related to but it's more commonly associated with pretending. And then the mouth. So here we have shuwahi, to run out, to come to its end, to be used up. And then we see shuwahi, to be killed off. So that tells us quite a bit about what we're looking at. And if we wanted to, we can go look that one up. But for now, we're going to just switch back. We're going to say kushuwahi. So in this case, this k is the fourth person object pronoun, people. So and then you'd say kushuwahi, caused the people to die out. It's a pretty hardcore verb. It does do, like, shuwahi means to run to its own end. And it sometimes it has some pretty, it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. So I could say dechtak shuwahi. What do you think I'm saying by that? Dechtak shuwahi.
2 years went by.
2 years, yeah, 2 years have passed. So you could say that, right? And so it could just mean it ran out too. Like if we had this bag of coffee beans, and I say, "Ha, it ran out already. So now we got to go walk 6 miles for a cup of coffee, or however far we're gonna go." Okay, we're 2 sentences in. Any questions? Okay, before we take our break, there was another question which was asking about when do you use on, which can become, or in, sorry. So in, which can become on, and then when do you use ach? So these are a little bit different, but are doing the same thing. And so they both mean with it. Okay, so this is with it, and this is with it. But this CH is what we call, I think we call it like an instrumental, which means you did a verb with that thing. And so, or you use that thing with to. For example, when you say the thing that people eat with. But you could say shalch, shawachich, they use the spoon to club somebody on the head. So they are interchangeable, but I would say ach has a lot more to do with like using it as some sort of tool, whereas this is just like, you could say on wugut, they went walking with it. And so, yeah, they're close, but they're slightly different. And I think you see on used quite a bit more than ach. Ach is sort of like you kind of got to specify that they did the verb with this thing. And so that means this thing was kind of instrumental in doing the verb, right? So like I pried it off with this stick, as opposed to like I went walking with this stick, right? Which is just like it's just part of the thing. Whereas when that first one, like it's pretty instrumental to executing the verb. Okay. Okay, must be break time. Come back at 10 till. 10 till whatever time zone you're in. Okay. So we were doing some stuff on translation. And so translating from English to Tlingit, I think, is very valuable. But I also think sometimes we can get in the weeds with really big language. So like we're going to scale it back and start going the other direction now and talk about asking questions in Tlingit. So I was talking with teachers of beginning Tlingit about this little graphic here. Do y'all understand what this is showing? Does it make sense how it works? Okay. So on this left side, you have your question particle. And this tells you what type of question you're asking, although it's not always a question. Then you have sa, which is technically a verb. And the verb is the command form for name it. So if we've ever heard this as a verb, it's probably been like ye-uwa sa or ye-duwa sa, something like that. Then you have ya, he, we, and yu, which don't always have to be there, but they will pop up pretty regularly, especially if it's not part of a longer string of things. It just makes it sound a little bit more complete. And so da is usually a what question. Da is usually a which one. Wa or ma is usually how. A do or a is usually who. Gu, which likes to have a suffix, is usually where. And then whatever the suffix is, you're usually going to match that suffix. Gudesa-wu gud, neildé-wu gud, gudachsa-wu gud, neildach-wu gud. Khun is how much or how many. Gutgin or gutgin, if you're from Yakutat, the little y means Yakutat. When in the future, gutk or gutk, when in the past. Dat yis sa, for the benefit of what. Dat qasa, going after what. Dat kagsa, for what purpose. Wanachsaya or manachsaya is why. Okay, so there's a couple of these where you can put something in between the question marker and sa. For example, you could say da sa, which one? But how would you say which apple? Does anybody know? The way that I would recommend is you change the to the noun. Da sa, which apple? Da sa, which cat? Da sa, which water or river? Not every speaker will do that. Some of them they'll say da sa wechat or da chat sawe. They might say it like that. But I do believe you could say da chat sawe, which fish? Okay. Same with a do. So this one does get a little tricky if you wanted to say, whose turn is it? A do eat sa. kuwaha. So the eat goes right there. Adu ide sa kakitishi. Who are you going to help? Kun is another one. Kun sa. How many apples? Kun danasa. How much money? Right. So there are times when you could put a noun in between these and sa. And you can also put things in between da and sa. And if you do, it will change to dot. So that's why you say dot iti nach sa iyati. What do you need? Dot ya nach sa qadutlitzin. What is more valuable? Okay. Any questions about that? We're going to go through some examples.
So when you're saying you're putting that T in there, if you have a noun there, do you always put the T in, or only if it starts with a vowel?
No, you always do.
Always do.
So you say dot etinachsa, and that word starts with a vowel. What's really wild is, how do you say, what's it about? Anybody know? It's my favorite, because you say dot sa. Dot sa. Okay, what's the cha and the klesh doing over there? What do they do?
They
Let is
changed the
saying
meaning
no.
slightly.
Okay, like how? What does the cha do?
Just.
That's what it means, yes. But when you combine them, you say cha da sa.
Kind of like whichever
Yes, so cha
or
da
whatever.
sa, whatever. Cha da ka sa, whichever one. Now I got balloons. Everybody see that? What did I do? Did I do this? Okay, now I've solved the balloon puzzle. Now I can have balloons whenever I want. What does 3 do? Anything?
Whatever.
Okay, now it's 2. Okay.
I think the 2 is actually a V for like a victory sign or something like that. Like I think at the end of like Mario, he does like a little V sign when you complete the game, you know.
I could never count
play
like that
Mario
again now. I'll have to count this way, see what happens. Okay. Okay. Yes, so cha da ka sa, whichever one. Cha wa sa, whichever one.
However,
But however, and it could mean like, if you're saying, how should I do this? However you want. But if you look at someone and they're doing something and you said, now you're saying that they're really doing things any old way. So sometimes you're criticizing a little bit. Cha'adusa, whoever. Chaguksa, wherever.
so what would be ever sick would be cha and
Oh,
ever
right.
sick.
Chaukunsa, however many.
Tlein.
Okay. Whenever in the future. Chagwat. The other ones, it doesn't really make sense when you go beyond that. What about klesh?
Negative.
Not.
Negative.
No.
What do you get for
So it
klesh?
kind of takes the cha and kind of negates it.
Yeah, so cha dasa is whatever. What's klesh dasa?
Not.
Nothing.
Nothing.
Not whatever. It's nothing.
Right. So nothing. Keshwasa gets its own special meaning. It's like, it's okay. So that one breaks. It's like, I'm my own thing. I have nothing to do with these rules, right? It just has its own special thing. And it means it's okay. That's all it means. Keshasa, nobody. Keshguksa, nowhere. The other ones might not make as much sense. Okay. But just in terms of like, that's how these can sort of combine. So let's take a look at some of them in use. What am I doing? Okay. It's really honky. Okay, here's our first question. So we start with dasa. And then what we're going to do is we're going to start thinking about verbs and verb phrases and some of the parts of the verb. We'll see if this matches my current color schemes. It might not, but we'll see. So we can say dasa and to use it in a phrase, dasa ituwasagu. So the goal here, we're going to see a different color scheme when we start to sort of pull the verb apart. So what this slideshow is showing us is how to identify both the verb, the root, not both, but how to identify these three things: the verb, the root, and the verb phrase. So the verb is usually like the single word. The verb phrase is saying you need these words to understand how that verb works. If you take off ituwa, then you just have they are happy, right? And so, or you just have, I guess, happiness. I don't know. So in this case, the sentence is asking you, what do you want or what do you like? Although if you said this to people, 90% of the time they would tell you what they want. Tlingit, I think, as a language, doesn't spend a whole lot of time talking about things we like. I think English does. Like, what's your top 5 movies? Who's your top 5 basketball players? Who's the top 5 hockey? Like, it's always making lists of things, right? And then like Tlingit, who's your best friend, right? And Tlingit doesn't really do that kind of stuff. But in this case, this is showing you like how you can ask a what question. Okay. Okay, is that underlined so low? Okay, figured out. So the question we can ask, which one is red? Okay. So here we have yati is the verb, t is the verb root, khan yach is saying to be which one is red. So khan yach yati, it is red. Daq asa khan yach yati, which one is red? I'll figure out what's going on. I had to reset my fonts and it's wigging out a little bit. Okay. Adusa. So here's the question we can ask with that one. Adusa kakisha. So this is showing you who are you going to marry? I always have a hard time thinking of like questions like, but in this case, so this is a future verb. Here's the root, here's the verb, and the verb phrase is just a single word. Okay. Thoughts? And so I would probably redo this one like this. We're gonna just fix it. So this vowel ending is probably going to trigger this contraction. So I would probably say adusakishan, right? It's a very personal question. So why do you think we would put this CH on there?
Is it always?
It's the ergative.
Yeah.
It's
so
making that the subject.
So on a verb, the CH ending happens habitually or repeatedly.
Yeah.
When you put it onto a noun, and in this case onto a douche, you're specifically saying who did the verb.
Oh, okay.
And so, and the ways you would use this, like if we go back to that talk story, it's always, I think it just uses third person pronouns all the time. But that's why you'll see it just says the cannibal did this. So it happens when we start to go back and forth between who's doing the thing and if the grammar is ever a little bit unclear on who might be doing it. So atutsawucha, who ate it. So in this case, the whole thing, now that you have the CH, that becomes linked permanently to the verb. And then you have łucha, at.óowu. Kudesa. I got a bunch of things on this one. So here, kudesa yanikuch. And maybe we'll all just say it. Kudesa yanikuch. So this is saying, where are you going? By boat or by car? Your answer would be, so you'd have the same day. So you might say, neildé yanchakuch. Ḥunateení yanchakuch. At.óowu yanchakuch. ḥunateení yanchakuch. Right? You got all kinds of places, wherever you want to go. And then this is saying, what was this one saying down here? Kudesa yakuníteení.
Where are you traveling to?
Where are you traveling to? Right? So this is by boat or by car, it's by any, whatever means you're going. Okay. Then I think I went, oh, this is a previous version. I went crazy now. Kudesa yanigut. Neildé yanchagut. Kudesa yigud. Oops, I don't know why these are questions. Neildé chwagud. Kudesa kakigud. Neildé chwagud. So what are these? How would I translate these 6 over here? Kudesa yanigut.
Where are you going?
Neildé
Or
yan.
where is he go?
No, this is
Oh,
you.
where are
Where
you going?
isn't it you?
The knee is you. Yep. Neildé yanchagut.
I'm going home.
I'm going towards home.
Kudesa yigud.
That should be where are y'all going? No, it's because gut is singular. So it'd have to be something else.
Yes. Anyone else? Any theories?
Where did you go?
Where did
Past
you
tense or
Where did you go?
perfect.
Yes. Neildé chwagud.
I went home.
I went home. Kudesa kakigud.
Where will you go?
Neildé chwagud.
I will go home.
Yeah, away. Yeah, away. And then on the right, this does show there are a couple of verbs where the ending falls off in the command form, and this is one of them. So you'd say neildé naku, go home. And we see a similar one in qanu. So qanu means sit down. Wunuk would be they sat down. So the K falls off here, the T falls off here. We still recognize it. Right? Oops. Okay. Unsa. Unsa iya'u. How many did you buy? And so again, here's the verb. The whole verb phrase is just the verb itself. Here's the root. Ooh. So how would I say, how many pencils did you buy?
Kuhida sa iau.
Un kuhidasa iya'u. How would I say, how many Dungeness crab did you buy?
Too expensive.
Sao sa iau.
Un tsao sa iya'u. How many necklaces did you buy?
Un set sa iau.
How many kittens did you buy?
Un douche sa iya'u or douche yadi sa iya'u.
Okay, okay. Okay, so quatkinsa. What is this one asking? Bueno.
Is that like the what purpose one? No. It's
There yet.
it's the when, right?
It's a win. But there's win, some type of win, and win another type of win.
This is the when future.
When
So,
future, yeah. Because the G, yeah.
quatkinsa. Oops, here's another one where that should trigger the contraction. Quatkinsa nechtik kikut. Which is, I guess you're asking them to, that'd be an awkward question to ask. When you going home? Nechtik kikut. Quatkinsa nechtik kikut. So just to start looking at futures, since we're using a few of them, kukagut, gukikut, gukagut. I am, you are, they are. And we will see contracted versions of these. So you can have kukagut and you can have kukwagut. It depends. If there's a vowel before it, then you'll get that contracted version. If there's not, then you'll get kukagut. So all of these have a contracted version, which I guess I'll put out of room here. But you'd have kukwa, and then you'd have kaki, and then you'd have kukwa. Right, and you'll see this, you'll learn how to spot this, and you'll also learn when to use the contracted versions. Oh, here they are, Tubas. So what happens here is there are some consistent things in Tlingit. There's just a lot to remember. But this ga, which if we go back, we see kakikut, kukakut, kukakut. If we take the vowel out of here, it turns into a K, which is, this is something we've seen earlier when you had yak, ach, yake. So we learned that rule going one way. Now we see the rule going the other way. Take that vowel out, goes back to a K. Pretty interesting. Kukwagut, kukigut, kukagut. Oops. Okay. Okay, we'll leave the adsing for later. Okay. Okay, we already did that. Okay. Quatksa, when in the past. Quatksa hat iagut. When did you get here? So this one, the verb root is gut. The verb is iagut. The verb phrase is hot iagut. This hot does trigger the iagut. What you'll learn is you can say iagut and ye good. There's gonna be times when you're gonna select which one to use. Dot yissa. Dot yissa yissa e. What are you cooking it for? So this, like, the context could be, I came over, you're cooking this giant thing of moose soup. So I say, ha, dot yissa yissa e. There's got to be some kind of function or people coming over or what. So the yes is usually for the benefit of something. Dot qasa. So this is a combination, like this could be written just like that. So you see the qa, but that causes the da to close with that T. And so in this case, this over. Datqasaqi. What are they looking for? Well, I do. Hold on. That shouldn't separate. Okay. There. It's a suffix. Sorry. Wanakhsaya. Wanakhsaya iqah. Why are you crying? There's the verb, the whole verb phrase. And we're going to learn, like, we'll look at all the parts that are in there, and we'll learn how to identify those parts and figure out why is this E. It's predictable. It is. Dasawi. Okay, I think we did these ones already. Okay. What comes after? Okay, we'll look at the rest. But this, it comes back to like these questions. Like, so asking these questions, figuring out how to identify them. They're not always questions, right? So for example, dasa, I could say, I have a whole list of things. Tlein at.óowu ayewuti. Dugu, nusk dugu, dugu, dasa. So if I, what would that be saying, right? Tlein at.óowu ayewuti. Tlein at.óowu ayewuti. Any parts you don't recognize? Tlein at.óowu ayewuti. It's the Tlein part.
Many.
Many. What's the at.óowu?
You go in.
That's kind of what
where you
confuses
go?
me.
Where you go? Where go?
Okay. What is
Because I'm hearing both adu and gu. It's like who and where.
Tlein? Okay. Let's get to the bottom of it. So it's Tlein at.óowu ayewuti. And then I would say,
Oh, Google.
I don't remember the order. Dugu, nusk.
Dugu is skin or hide.
So yes, we have Duke. So your Duke is skin. Duke is also complexion. And what's really interesting, okay, well, let me come back to this one. Yeah, okay. So Tlein at.óowu ayewuti. So if now so Dugu, so you have Dugu, wolf high, nusk Dugu. What kind is it?
Wolverine.
Dugu.
Sea otter.
Sea otter.
Yeah, oh wow. So if you have, what do you think at.óowu is then?
Kind of a generic hide for whatever animal, whatever it might be.
Yes, some things hide, right? I should do that whenever you guys like get things right. We'll do balloons. Thumbs up. What's the other one? I had another cool one. Oh, I think if I did this.
Sign, do the
Now I get confetti. Amazing. Okay. Okay, so at.óowu is just like a hide or hides, right? So now, what's the sentence? What's the first part of the sentence say? Tlein at.óowu ayewuti.
Wuti is there were.
Yes, when you have ayewuti, it was there. There were lots of hides there. Now we get a list. Poochdugu, Nuskdugu, Yochdugu, Dasa. What would the Dasa do right there?
You're like, which one?
Would
Yeah.
it function kind of like etc.?
Yes. So you like, if you were to translate this, there were hides there. There were lots of hides there. Wolf hides, wolverine hides, sea otter hides, whatever. All kinds. Like however you want to do that last part. But yes, it's like saying all etc. and more, right? Here's a Tlingit phrase that's very hard to know unless you've heard it. So we just established what Duke was, right? Skin or complexion. What could this be saying? There's a literal meaning, and then there's what it means.
Real meaning would be like, you don't, skin has no life.
Yes.
I
So
think he was
Albino?
talking.
the literal, it's a little hard to hear you, Shot Dog.
Oh, it looked like your skin has no life, or your skin. No
So
life.
the literal interpretation is
There,
they
okay.
have
Yeah,
no skin, or their skin doesn't exist, right? So I guess maybe that's a little more their, whoops, their skin. But what do you think this is saying? It's
They have thin skin.
thin skin. Yeah.
not thin skin.
They're exposed. They're like showing everything.
It's really interesting because like when
Are they blushing?
that is very close. What if they don't blush?
They're ashen or pale.
They don't get embarrassed. That's a really interesting. It's like here's another thing where it's like you just gotta know. Like we were talking about this in a different class today. Where like teaching a language means you also have to get this whole context thing, right? Because people would be like, they were what? They're rolling in the hay. That's what were they doing that for, right? And but if you didn't know, if you know the language, you'd be like, oh, right? Or maybe I don't know. Maybe it was good. Who knows? Okay. Okay. So that was questions. I think we should pick up our verbs. I was color coding these on the break. And I think we left off with this verb. So the goal here is to just predict what the verb is going to be in a very, just sort of thinking of command, imperfective, perfective, future, first person, second person, third person. We'll probably only have time to do a few of these, but we're also practicing reading the verb theme. So there is an object, there is a subject, so that means it's a transitive verb, it has both of them. There's a D+0 classifier, which means we should be expecting di or da, and then na is going to be the verb root. This one means to drink. There's a second one, which I think is to oil something or to put lotion on it. It's an act verb, so there will be an imperfective. That imperfective will be da, because it's minus I. It's 0, and that tells us some things about what the stem is going to be. So we should expect da and di. That's what we're going to get. We start putting this verb into action. Command form, da. Doing it, da. Did it, di. Will do it, da. So, how do you think you would command someone to drink it? Anybody got a good guess? Or just a guess?
Nah.
Nah would be take it. So we can't lose the classifier. And I'm going to tell you, I'm gonna tell you a little secret about this.
Dana.
I'm gonna tell you a secret about this. When you have a plus D classifier, that's when the command form will have I. So it usually doesn't, right? You just say, ha, eat it. But because it has da, you're going to get I, da, na. It's just one more thing. It's like yet another thing to remember. So here it is. It did not. It did not. Drink it. It did not. This one is going to be the same right here. Okay. So what we should expect here is we're going to still have dana down here, but we should have ha, I, and 0. But once we have 0, we should expect the object to switch to a. So with that, how do you think it'd say, I am drinking?
Adana.
Adana.
Yeah, oh, khadana, khadana. You are drinking it.
Idna.
And
Idana. Idana. They are drinking it.
Adana.
Yeah, oh, adana. Adana. Okay. So when we switch down here, we should expect the classifier switching to di. So we should have hua. We should have ye. And we should have ow. And if you're from Tessin or Carcross, you might have But we're going to end up with di, na, long and high. It's long and high because it's a 0 conjugation type, which we'll learn about later. Any predictions for I drank it?
Wadna.
Wadna, yeah, you drank it.
Yidina.
You did not. They drank it. Audana or dana. And like, even though we're getting like complex patterns here, if we change this to SI, we change the D to an S, we changed na to ku, chasaku, yisaku, ausaku. So what we're seeing here is even though we're changing it, like it does become, it's all predictable, but there's just lots of moving parts. So the last one of this evening, what's going to happen here is we should have probably k, ka, da. So we're going to have dana, dana, dana. So this will be D-A-N, high tone, long. So it's going to be na still. So you should have k, k, ka, ka, and ak. No, aguchta. We'll get to that one. I'm going to give you that one. Aguchta. So I will drink it.
Kadana.
Qadana. You will drink it.
Idina.
Qadana. They will drink it. It's going to start with aguchta.
Aguchtana.
Agutadina.
Aguchtana. Yeah, away. Yeah, away. Here's all the parts that are in there. And so we'll see like this is the object, this is the conjugation prefix. Someday I'll go through and color code all of this stuff, but it's not gonna happen today. So, but just like so we can see what changes. Ha, 0. חה-0. חה-0. The conjugation stuff, y, ga, all the way across. So what we're doing here is we're just sort of seeing what these verbs look like when they start to change. And then we're going to start like just throwing out some predictions. Maybe it's this, maybe it's that. Then our brain will start to see those patterns. Then what we'll do is we'll go one by one and we'll say, let's learn how to do a perfective. That way you can look at any verb, if you see it, and say, I could put that in the perfective. I know how to do it, right? And so it's a matter of like learning which parts need to go in there and then how they affect each other. Any questions before we go? Okay. Gönülçiş Johan. Tutaye.
Tlein gönülçiş.
Could you show that image just one more time? I want to make sure I took a note right.
Sure.
Tlein gönülçiş.
Jewish Team.
Graftish.